Welcome back. Still watching Business Morning. Now to our next conversation. We know the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted global economies in unprecedented ways, from health to harsh economic impacts. But many of the primary effects of the COVID-19 crisis in Nigeria have been economic, and lack of social protection exposes any population to large welfare losses. Well, the federal government launched the National Social Register in 2016 and now holds over 44 million individuals. But how has it fared in capturing a vulnerable in society? To talk about this, we have Yowa Para, National Coordinator, National Society Safety Nets Coordinating Office. Join us on Business Morning. Great to have you on the program, sir. Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, so, when we talk about social safety and social protection, like that obtained in developed countries, some would argue that the vulnerable in Nigeria are not adequately, protected. Can you paint a picture of where we are now when it comes to social safety?
Thank you very much. The social safety nets flaws or space in Nigeria, it's recent, it's new. It's been, perhaps you would say, a sector that is only growing. But not that we are inexperienced or we don't have experiences in this. We have had that long ago. Our various attempts at poverty alleviation programs such as NAPEP, such as Program for Roma Women, Shopee, are all programs that speaks to the social protection flaws. However, in 2015, when the current administration came into being, they prioritized social protection as the major strategy for poverty alleviation in the country. And because we didn't really have a strong system before then, and they started from the scratch. So they started by establishing some of the building blocks of social protection implementation, one of which was the establishment of the social register. Now, the social register is an information gateway to potential eligible beneficiaries to any social intervention program. And so the country decided to build from the bottom up. You will see from past experiences of Shopee, NAPEP, and other programs, it was more top-bottom, where the federal government decides on the program, either to give Keke NAPEP, or to give cash for pregnant women, and the likes. From the federal level, pass on to the state, and the state government will then decide who gets what at that state level. However, with this current thinking, in line with global best practice, the bottom-up approach was adopted by the federal government, wherein the community members, who are the people themselves, will sit in plenary and determine who amongst them is poor, based on the context of that community and what they define to be poverty. And so the community will come together and will divide the community in three homogeneous groups of male adult, female adult, and then the youth. And they will be asked to define poverty within the context of the community. And you know the complexities of Nigeria. One community is different from the other. Like Edna Ogoli said, 1 kilometer makes another language in Nigeria. And right. So with those kind of cultural diversities, the context for which we define certain concepts is completely different from the other. And so when the community members, the male, the female, the youth define what poverty means to them, we then ask them to identify those who are poor and vulnerable amongst them. And once they do that, we come back to the plenary with the entire community and form the harmonized poverty list for that community. And so the three groups will have to agree on a family are judged to be poor based on their definitions. Some definitions come around families who cannot afford any piece of land to farm on. That means they don't have any title land to their names or their family, and therefore they are poor. Others will attest to that if even though you have land, you cannot afford to farm because you can't afford farming inputs or labor, then you're poor. Others will define it as a household with just 2 round huts, but 10 members of the family cohabiting in 2 round huts. That means they cannot afford basic housing. And as we know, poverty is multidimensional. Poverty is not only income, but poverty in your health, poverty for infrastructures or access to schools or sending children to school, etc. And so once this is done, the community would then sign off on this harmonized list. They would select one male and one female who will sign off on this list that becomes the community poverty list, or what you could call a community social register. We pick this list and we'll go back to then register this community using electronic devices through a software called Kobo Collect.
Okay.
Now, what we also do in addition is to take the community profile. So for every poor and vulnerable household that is picked in the family and we register them, we could easily identify the proximity of that household to the nearest hospital, to the nearest market, to banking facility, the strength of GSM network in that community, access to that community, whether by tar road, bush path, etc., the presence of a police station,
All right,
a
Mr.
supermarket, etc. Now,
Okay.
this infrastructure and the profile of the community is so identified within the social register to also help intervention. Now, fast forward to your question around how have we fared. So far, from the beginning, and by 2018, when we came on board, when I came in as a national coordinator, we had the social register in about 8 to 19 states, and the total number put together was about 350,000. What we then did was to pull it together. First, look at the checklist that will collect the information and harmonize it with the national databases. You will recall in 2015, Mr. President signed a white paper mandating all national databases to harmonize their records with the NIMSI. And so with the social register harmonized with NIMSI database, it then means if you take information from the national social register for any individual, all you need to do is the biometrics to give a bank account number, international passport, or access to tax identification number, and all the rest.
All right, Mr.
Now,
Pera.
from 2018, April 1st,
okay.
Yeah, to
so
date, we have registered 44 million poor and vulnerable individuals. Now, is that enough? No. The absolute poverty head count of Nigeria as at March 2020, when NBS released the figure, puts the absolute head count of Nigeria about 40.2%, translating to about 82 million individuals below the poverty line. With COVID-19, a further estimate of between 7 to 10 million have fallen further down the poverty line, making it around 92 million. We are at 44 million. That's almost about 49 or 47% of the total poor in the country. Now, this provides a huge database for interventions. At the moment, the federal government, through the National Cash Transfer Office, is paying 2 million out of that number, 5,000 every month. Every two months, they pay 10,000 naira. But also, utilizing the social register is UNDP, who has also mined for small businesses, and they are paying about 38,000 naira to small business holders across 10 states, about 150,000 of them. The UN Women mined close to 20,000 single mothers, that's widows or single mothers, in the register, and they are paying them 10,000 naira.
All right, Mr. Pera. Mr. Pera, but, you know, with all these monies, you know, being disbursed, how do you make sure that the people that actually need this money actually get it?
It's from the social register. Like I said, the social register is the bottom up. So it is those who actually are just poor and vulnerable in their communities and society that gets to benefit. It is about the most transparent process of identifying the poor and vulnerable. Now, when the COVID hit, the federal government also came up through the Economic Sustainability Plan, the 1 million cash transfer, through what a process we call the Rapid Response Register. This Rapid Response Register targets the urban poor. Now, when we started building the register, we started with the poorest communities. But you agree with the COVID-19 and the impact, it is on the urban poor. And the targeted urban poor herein are those who depend on daily income in our community, in our society, in our cities for survival. The taxi drivers, the bus drivers, the akara woman seller on the side of the street, the salonist, the barber, the bricklayer. Those people who they must come out every day to earn a living. Of course, all of us that work in offices also come out every day to earn a living, but our salaries are fixed monthly. But these people, if they don't come out and earn that, sell that akara, sell that granite, or carry the passenger on Okada, they will not earn. So these are the urban poor that we target through a scientific methodology of identifying them
But what
using
about
SMS and USSD code for them to register.
but what about those that are employed and lose their jobs? Is there any accommodation for them?
Yes, they are accommodated in the rapid response register. So those who have lost their jobs, usually when the economic crisis of COVID-19 hit, a lot of people lost their jobs. If you go even, the last time I used the example of channels, I mean, you used to have like maybe 3 gardeners or 4 gardeners, you used to have driver, security, and all of that. And it's across all businesses. And because the businesses were hit, income for businesses was dropped, and so all businesses were in crisis. And so they laid off staff. Those people are the people we're targeting in the rapid response register. So once they apply through dialing 969, or *969# with the community code through a USSD entrance, they are able to register onto the rapid response register. And at the moment, the federal government is paying those from that rapid response register, 1 million of them, 5,000 for 6 months. Now, this 5,000 for 6 months will help people come back on their feet. But more, that we are now on a business time program. Let's speak more to the advantages this holds for businesses and why perhaps we advocate that businesses should be taking interest in social safety net programs such as ours to invest in. When you inject cash into the economy through a cash transfer, there is evidence, global evidence, that you have a return of 1 naira, 3 kobo for every 1 naira that you push in. Now, let's take an example where you give 5,000 naira to someone who's lost his job, who's been back at home. Immediately, the global evidence shows that 70% of that amount of money will be used on basic consumption, which is food, medicine, or call credit. Let's even take call credit. You've empowered the person to buy a credit of 500 naira into his phone. Now, what then happens is that there's increase in demand for call cards. And when demand increases, you are the economics, you tell me better, supply will need to come.
Right.
And when supply comes, there's pressure on production. You need to make the products available to meet the demand. And when you increase production, all the economics of scale then set in. You will need to employ more people to be able to meet your production quota. And so these people that have been laid off suddenly have opportunities to come back to the job by just injecting that amount of money. That's why countries like US, immediately after post-COVID, injected cash into their economy by paying, I think, about $1,000 to those who have been impacted or affected by the COVID.
Right,
And so
the stimulus package.
it's a short gap measure of between 6 months, not more than 1 year. And when you inject that kind of money, then you trigger demand. When you trigger demand, supply will have to come. And when supply comes, production will have to come. And when production steps up, there are gaps created. One, in terms of employment and employing more people.
All right, Mr. Pera.
Demand on pressure on raw materials, which then put pressure on our local producers, farmers, and all of that, increase their income. But hey, the good news again is government also smiles to the bank because taxes are going to increase. Income taxes are going to come from the company.
Yes. Let's
and consumer tax and VAT.
Let's look at another angle of this. Now, all of this costs money. How is funding, funding most of these interventions, where are these monies coming from?
So for the federal government, from our point of view, our program is run by a facility taken by the federal government from the World Bank of 500,000 US dollars over 5 years. The first phase of this program will terminate June 2022. With this, how have we used this money? We've used this money to raise the Nigeria's first social register of poor and vulnerable. It is by far the most comprehensive database in the country at the moment, housing information of 44 million Nigerians. That particular data set has 138 data indicators for every individual across the biodata, the educational qualification of that person, the vocation, the location of the person, whether the disability status, the health status, clinically ill or what it is. It also houses information on school enrollment, etc. So it's a huge database. Now, this is all available, and you know data is gold. Using data, every state is able to plan for their poor and vulnerable developmental projects. So the value is huge in that sense. Now, also, we've been able to use that money to pay 2 million people 5,000 naira every month, injecting on average. That's 5,000 times 2 million gives you around 100 billion. Forgive my maths, I'm not very good at figures, but about that in the economy. As an economist, you know, feeding that amount of cash and the multiplier effect of it and the impact of it. The federal government is also now discussing with the bank, with the high rising cost of inflation occasioned by COVID-19, but other economic crises, an intervention with the World Bank to continue, but targeting now on the urban poor who are most impacted. The federal government has also announced the removal of oil subsidy. This will bring immediate hardship to the urban poor.
Yes, that's
the taxi
another.
drivers, the transporters, etc. So federal government is saying, I want to pay 40 million people for the first 6 months to cushion the effect. Now, what the federal government is using this to do, it's not to throw money away, but it's using that 5,000 naira to cover the gap of increase in transport. And perhaps a little explanation. So when you commute from, say, Nyanya to central area here for 100 naira, as an urban poor, when the oil subsidy is removed, that transport cost is going to increase to 200 naira. But you still have your 100 naira. Now, the federal government will give this 5,000 naira that will cover that gap of that extra 100 naira for you for the first 6 months. This helps you stabilize. The shock is not as much as it would be felt ordinarily, and you're able to then channel your energies to improving your status and back into line. But that stopgap does help. But then the injection of that cash into the economy helps stimulate economic growth, like I explained earlier. So it's a balancing act. And cash transfer is not a giveaway. It's a strategic investment in unlocking the economic potentials of this country.
Okay, Mr.
Because everyone, and we have success stories everywhere of using these monies to invest, to improve their economic lives and their communities.
What about those in the rural areas? How do you reach, those in those parts, and also those that are on banks that don't have, bank accounts? How do you get these monies to them?
So we work with the state team. So for every state of the federation, 36 states and the FCT, there's a state operations and coordinating unit in the ministries of planning. It is deliberate, and we insist that it has to be in the Ministry of Planning, because the planning ministry is where government development efforts are domiciled in terms of plans, in terms of budget, but in terms of tracking impact and also looking at the performance. And then, in turn, the State Operations Coordinating Unit recruits staff of the local government. In every local government of the Federation, 774 local governments, we have what we call the community-based targeting team, ranging from 18 to 30 members of the team. They are responsible for reaching out to the communities and developing the registry. Now, As far and as much as possible, payments is digitized. And you will agree with me that in every of our communities now, we have an offshoot or growth of POS, payment service providers in each of the communities. Communities where you don't have some domicile, in every market day, you will have POS and access to POS. So we do digital. To places where those infrastructures are completely absent, and we know this because we do the community profile that I explained to you earlier, that we know the proximity of every poor and vulnerable household peak to markets, to good roads, to banking facility, etc. So those communities that we've mapped that have a complete absence of such infrastructure, we use what you call the money agent. And you know also that we have mobile money agents all over the country. So these mobile money agents take the cash to the beneficiaries who have access, don't have access to facilities. But then your question on the unbanked, what we are doing with the social register. Remember I said that we have harmonized our checklist with the national database. So it means the bank taking only the information of any individual in the social register, you give a bank account directly. And we are partnering with a lot of banks who are doing this, and we're giving bank accounts. We just partnered with Zenith Bank. And using information from the social register. In a turnaround of 2 days, Zenith Bank gave bank accounts to 30,000 individuals on the social register who are currently benefiting from the UNDP cash transfer, paying directly to their accounts. So this kind of partnership is ongoing with a number of banks across the country and other money agents. Good news is the federal government has also granted license to MTN and Airtel, expanding further the opportunities to bank our people.
Okay, Mr. Apara, thank you so much, Mr. Yowa Apara, the National Coordinator, National Social Safety Nets Coordinating Office. Thank you so much for coming on Business Morning. We've run out of time now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.